What's up, everybody? I'm Taylor, and here I share my personal recovery journey. I share, suggestions on what action I took to pull myself out of addiction. Not just pull myself out of active addiction, but keep myself out of active addiction by a daily maintenance plan. So this video is really for people who are thinking about getting sober or struggling to stay sober, people who are chronic relapsers. I was a chronic relapser myself. And even if you don't have a problem with substances, I'm sure that these suggestions that I'm going to provide in this video can help you with anything a person is struggling with. I've been sober since 2020. I've been on my healing journey for about 3 years. And when I first got sober in 2020, I wasn't aware that there were Zoom meetings. And so it wasn't an option for me to go to an in-person meeting because, one, my anxiety was too bad. Every time I would go to an in-person meeting, it would trigger me and it would make me want to drink. Two, I did not have any trust with my spouse because I had broken his trust due to things that I had done in my past. So I wasn't self-aware that Zoom was available, so I had to get sober on my own. And I'm going to share a little bit about how that worked out for me. So for me to quit drinking, I had zero support. I was a stay-at-home mom, and so I stayed at home all the time. And so I had to really get creative, and I had to really work really hard at taking action and taking certain steps that would allow me not to choose to pick up a drink. So this is what I did. I wrote a motivational letter to myself, and in that letter I stated the consequences of what happened my last drink, what will happen if I don't drink, everything I will lose, and a motivational and letter of encouragement of encouraging me of why I want to stop drinking. And I would sit that paper on my desk and I would pick it up about 100 times a day. I'm just throwing a number out there. Yes, that sounds dramatic, but every time I looked at that piece of paper, I put it in a place that I could see it. And every time I saw it, even when my brain told me, oh, you don't need to read that paper, you already know what it says, I forced myself to pick up that paper and I read what I wrote out loud. And what that did is that trained my brain to realize if you pick up, you're going to lose everything. Drinking is not worth losing my family, losing what I have got in my life the past 10 years. It's not worth it. I've lost everything because of addiction, because of the choices that I chose to make. I've lost custody of kids. I've lost a kid. I've lost trust with family members. I've burnt all bridges. I've lost everything because of addiction. I never had a stable job. I never had my own house. I lived from couch to couch. I mean, the life that addiction carries is just the life that addiction carries, And so writing that letter was really important for me because it was retraining my brain, and it was introducing the consequences to my brain. And it was introducing my motives for not drinking, and it was introducing the motivation and the encouragement and me being supportive towards myself. And so I would do a lot of positive self-talk. And around that time, I was just learning about what affirmations were. I had no idea what intentions were yet, which today intentions play a huge role in my life, and I can do a separate video on that. So I was in counseling at the time. I would buy all these different counseling books, DBT, CBT, anything I could find, any book that I could read. That's what I was doing to keep myself busy. I thought that learning all of these things would help me heal. And so I say in my other videos that I decided to throw myself in college on top of all of this, and being a stay-at-home mom with a 3-year-old or 4-year-old. And I didn't even know how to manage my own life. So at the time, college was like an all or nothing thing for me because I used to be an all or nothing person before I started my healing journey. So I was all in college, and that is all I would ever do. College became my new addiction. And so eventually, with a person doing what I was doing, eventually a person can only mask their pain for so long until they just completely burn out. And my brain burnt out, which led to some serious depression. So I started sleeping all day, every day, okay? For about 2 years, I did this. Sleeping all day, every day, just binging on junk food, just miserable and broken, and just reliving my past every second of every day. And the only thing that kept me alive was my family. I wasn't alive for myself. I was staying alive because I knew my family needed me, and I knew my family loved me. But I couldn't find the willingness within myself to want to really make change happen. I was just so lost. I was so far away from myself. I was so disconnected from myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't love myself. I didn't know how to show up for myself. The resentments I had towards other people, and definitely myself, just ate me alive. I can remember there would be times where I would cry all day long, rocking back and forth, just wanting someone to see me, hear me, and understand me. And I did this for several years alone. So 12-step programs were the first resource that I had found out about, which I found out, before as a teenager, which I didn't take seriously, because what teenager is going to take Alcoholics Anonymous seriously? But I remember going to rehab maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. It's quite some time ago, and they introduced AA into my brain enough for me to remember that that was still an option. So I remember that I knew deep within myself that I was so tired of being miserable and broken, because I wanted to drink and use every second of every day. I wanted to die every single day. I knew that if I didn't get up and take action, that I was going to drink and die, because when in the past, when I have been depressed and I drink, I always hurt myself or someone else. It doesn't turn out too well. And so I brought my ass back into 12-step programs because, like I said, that was the only resource I had available. And there are so many different 12-step programs for whatever anybody is suffering with. There are also other recovery programs. If 12-step programs, isn't a person's thing, but for me at that moment, that was the only resource I knew I had. So when I came back in the program, and I would grab your notebook and take notes if you're really willing, I followed the suggestions. I am grateful that there is Zoom, because I would not be where I am at today without access to Zoom meetings. I did like 2 to 3 meetings a day, plus more when I knew I needed more. Sometimes I did a lot because I needed to introduce my brain to that support, to the fellowship, to that information that was being taught in Alcoholics Anonymous. I needed to understand my addiction. I needed to understand myself, and I needed to understand. And so the only way for me to understand was for me to stay long enough in 12-step programs for it to sink in. And that's where I went wrong all the years before. I would come in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would rush through steps 1 through 3 because that higher power thing always messed with my head, and I would use it as an excuse and some type of justification of why the program wouldn't work for me. So with me making this video, this is for anybody, like I said, who's trying to get sober. And the best way to get sober is to actually stay sober. And that has been my personal experience. And I know that it's hard to stay sober after living a life in addiction. And the reason is that the brain will reject anything that's not familiar. So for me, addiction was familiar my entire life. So when I got sober, my brain wanted addiction because that was my way of coping. Okay, that was my programming. That was my conditioning. That was who I was. I didn't know who I would be without addiction. But addiction was my coping mechanism to help me deal and manage pain, because I didn't have any other healthy coping mechanisms. I didn't know how to face pain. I didn't know how to face who I had become. I didn't know how to forgive myself or love myself or emotionally or spiritually show up for myself. I was not taught these things. So some suggestions I have for someone trying to get sober is to throw yourself into some type of recovery program, build solid support, people who make you feel good about yourself, attend as many meetings as it takes. You know, I like to say this all the time. I was willing to throw myself into active addiction my entire life. I was willing to hurt people to feed my addiction. So why can't I take that same willingness that I put towards my addiction and put that same willingness into my healing, into my recovery journey? I had to find a way to channel that willingness into growth. I had to find a way to turn my pain into motivation. I spent my entire life in pain, and I had to learn, and the only way I was able to learn was to be around people. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I was isolated for so long. I tried counseling, and I still do counseling today, but I tried reading all these books. I tried all the CBT, DBT, all these things, and nothing, everything I was learning, I couldn't find happiness within myself. I couldn't emotionally or spiritually connect to myself. And what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me, it's given me direct steps to take that has led me to building my own daily recovery schedule, that has led me to building my own support system, that has led me by hearing other people's experiences, strengths, and hopes, and applying what I learn outside the meetings into action through repetition, okay? And my brain fought against me for many, many months. On top of the fact, my first year in recovery, I decided to come off all my psych meds, so that was way harder than getting sober. And I just kept taking action. I created schedules and I took action. I maintained my commitments, because I knew that if I missed one meeting, if I missed one commitment, that's all it takes for me. Is because I'll miss one meeting, and then my brain will tell me, oh, it's all right, you can miss this second one, it's going to be okay. Before you know it, I'm out of the program again, you know? So in Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it the disease mind. I like to call it the negative mind, and there's so many different vocabulary words to describe the inner critic, negative mind, critical parent, like all these different types of vocabulary words, right? But I like to call it the negative mind. And how could I not expect to have that negative mind control me when it controlled me my entire life? That is all I had ever fed, was my negative mind. So when I started feeding my positive mind, the love, the compassion, and all the things that made me feel good about myself, by taking action and doing the next right thing and being honest, open-minded, and willing, I cannot emphasize on how hard it was for me to start having an open mind about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm just being honest, because this is my journey and this is my personal recovery experience, because the God concept would run me out the doors. So for me, staying in the meetings and self-reflecting on, like, why is this really bothering me every time I hear the word God? Questioning, like when I would hear someone else share and it activated or triggered something in me, self-reflecting and asking myself, why am I triggered right now? Why did what this person just say to me trigger me? What is it about this person? Because it's not about the person. There's something within myself. And the only way that I have been able to dive deep within myself to figure out these answers to these questions that I have is to self-reflect. And self-reflection can be painful, because for me, when I self-reflect, I see reality for what it is, okay? So what do I do with that reality? When I write down and I figure out what my triggers are and I know why, what do I do with that, right? Well, for me, I come up with a solution on what action I can take to help me heal those triggers, And I do a lot of positive self-talk. In the beginning of my program, I started doing a lot of positive self-talk. And what that looked like for me is because I would try the affirmations and they just felt funny to me, but I would still force myself to do it anyways. But for me, what really helps me is looking into the mirror every morning, because everybody looks in the mirror every morning to brush their teeth and get dressed, and doing a positive pep talk, motivating myself, encouraging myself, like just showing up for myself. And that was my version of affirmations. So journaling, okay? I downloaded a journal app and I like to voice record instead of write. I do write because I do a lot of self-reflection, but I also like to record myself talking because I can go back and listen to it and I can learn new things about myself. I might have heard something differently the first time and I'll hear it totally differently the next time. My pet wild raccoons are out in the yard. I feed them every night. That's how my higher power shows up. Anyway, so like these things are really important, is structure in the beginning of recovery. And when a person's getting sober, the most important things are building a routine and sticking to that routine no matter what. You know, I've learned to take what I've learned in 12-step programs and I've learned to break it down, my daily recovery schedule, into 3 parts. And the first part is spiritual connection to self and or a power greater than oneself. 2, emotional sobriety. 3, physical health. So 1, spiritual connection came much later for me in recovery. I wouldn't worry about that right now if you're a newcomer. If you're a newcomer, what I would focus on and what I focused on was taking action no matter what. Was building new healthy habits, building a support system, reaching out for support when you didn't want to, doing service work and helping someone else when you don't want to, but you do want to, not people pleasing, being honest, doing the next right thing, journaling. Like I said, creating new healthy coping mechanisms is what I solely focused on for the first 1.5 years in recovery, because I needed that stability. I needed that structure. I needed the support. And for me, it can still feel like at times my brain will try to convince me that no one cares, okay? And I'm just being real. But logically, I know that that's not true, because I put in the work in my recovery to heal parts of myself and to build an emotional and spiritual connection to myself. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning how my brain works. And I'm learning that sometimes my brain can lie to me, but that doesn't mean I have to listen to the lie. So the more good I did, the better I got. The more honest I stayed, the more honest I felt, the more authentic I felt. So for me, in the beginning of recovery, if you're thinking about doing 12-step programs or any, recovery program, just tweak it to how your brain, tweak it in a way that will help you understand. And if you don't understand, it's really important to ask questions, and not just ask one person a question, but ask as many people as you can a question. Right now I've been doing a lot of refuge recovery meetings, and I don't have to do a meeting every day. Sometimes I go times with not doing a meeting every day, but sometimes I do. It kind of, varies on how I'm feeling, because I've got such a solid structure. I've got that stability and I've learned to trust myself. But I am really into meditation. I would not be making these videos or just speaking about my personal recovery journey without meditation, because before meditation, I felt so like a void, right? Like that empty void. It's like I was doing all these great things in my recovery. I was taking action. I was building habits, new habits and coping mechanisms and structure and stability and patience and self-discipline, like all these things, right? But it's like something was missing. And what was missing was the connection to myself, because that is the one thing I lacked my entire life. And by having a variety of different recovery programs that I go to, I'm able to see things from all different types of lenses, not just one lens. It doesn't have to be one way or no way. It can be all the ways that can influence a person's recovery and can contribute to growth. So also, the most important thing that I left out was that when I wanted to use, or when I was sad or I was mad, I would read a book. I would read self-development. I would research something that was going to help me understand my brain. I would do inner work instead. I would take action and feel things in my brain that was going to help me grow and help me heal and help me learn and help me thrive. So the most important thing when a person gets sober is to actually stay sober long enough to push through that hard part, right? That hard part in the beginning is the hardest. And a lot of people don't know about PAWS, P-A-W-S, post-acute withdrawal symptom. And what that is usually people around their 60 to 100 days, the first 30 days is usually the roughest because your body's detoxing for the first time and you just feel like crap, you want to sleep, and you just feel yucky, right? But then you start feeling really good, right? And then you're like on cloud 9. Then that 60 to 100 day mark comes, and usually that's when people relapse. And the reason is because their brain is trying to level out after being in active addiction. And so the chemicals in our brain are trying to level out, which causes like mood swings, sadness, depression, anxiety. Like all these things are normal when a person is getting sober. Becoming depressed is normal when a person is getting sober. Having anxiety is 100% normal. Like all these things are normal because our brains are leveling out, on top of the fact that we had so much pain that we've held within ourselves our entire lives that we have not processed, that we have not grieved, that we have not released. And most importantly, we haven't learned how to love or emotionally connect to ourselves. So keep that in mind if you're first getting sober. All these things are normal to feel. Everything I just named is completely normal to feel. And the longer you stay sober, the easier it gets. And the more healing you do while you're sober, the better you will get and the better you will feel. And eventually, you won't have to work so hard. It will become natural habit. It will become a natural response. I never thought I would get to a place in my life today where I could actually pause when I'm pissed off, where I could actually control the reaction to my emotions, where I can sit in silence with painful emotions. I never thought that I would be able to do that today. And the only way that I was able to do that is because I wanted to do it. Not for anybody else. I wanted to do it for me because I deserved healing. I deserve love, and I deserve to show up for myself the way nobody has ever showed up for me my entire life. And I say that very strongly because it's the truth. Every single one of us came in this world alone, and we will die alone. And when we die, all we have is ourselves. I'm not saying don't get a support system. I say these words all the time to encourage people to look in the mirror and realize that all you have is yourself. I ran from myself my entire life, fighting a war within my head that I could never win. And the only way that I was able to start healing was to surrender to my pain. Surrender to that part of my brain that said, you can't, you never will, and you're not good enough to. I had to stop listening to that side of my brain, and I had to start telling myself, I can, I will, I have, and I am. And when I started changing my self-talk, that's when my world started changing. That's when my perception of who I am as a person and my perspective of my ability to make change happen changed. Change has to start from within. So if you're trying to get sober, if you're trying to overcome any addiction, the question is, what are you running from? Why are you trying to cope? What are you wanting to escape from? And really self-reflecting and understanding what's underneath this all, right? Because addiction is just a coping mechanism. It's just a behavior. There's always something underneath it. And so I hope this video was resourceful and that someone can take these suggestions and apply it to different areas of their life, and that, you know, if you want to get sober, you will. If you don't, and you know deep in the back of your mind you're not ready, then you're not ready. The willingness has to come from within one's heart.